Hey guys, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to Total War Warhammer. I'm thrilled that I can finally share my thoughts and experiences of the sequel to last year's hit title. And as I've already clocked up 50 hours of gameplay, it was starting to get really hard to keep quiet. Last year I had an absolutely great time playing the first in the series and was thrilled that my videos received such positive feedback and were viewed so many times. Creative Assembly, the studio behind the game, must have noticed this and approached me to sponsor a series of videos on the sequel. And so I'm proud to announce that in the upcoming weeks you're going to get a series of army guides for each of the new factions. But firstly, to set the scene, let's find out just what is Total War Warhammer 2. The game itself is the dream combination of Total War, a series of video games by Creative Assembly that over the last 15 years have really defined integrating turn-based strategy and resource management with epic, real-time clashes. And to say epic battles is almost an understatement. Later on in a campaign, you're fighting engagements with literally thousands of warriors divided into dozens of units, which you can individually control, seriously testing your skills. The other side of the coin is Warhammer, a tabletop game of fantasy battles by Games Workshop, which is so unbelievably rich in lore and history that you could dedicate years indulging and still have barely scratched the surface. The game's story itself is set around the Great Vortex, a maelstrom of magical energy created by the High Elves to protect the world from chaos. Each of the 4 playable factions in Warhammer Total War 2 are fighting for its control, some for good, others for evil, and who inevitably succeeds will be down to you. So how exactly do you succeed in Total War Warhammer 2, and what is the gameplay like? Well, if you've got about 50 hours to sit here, then I could probably show you what a campaign's like. And if you want to see the game in more detail, then come along to my Twitch live stream this Friday and I'll show you the first few hours of the campaign. But in essence, the game is micromanage your lords, use them to recruit a great army that fits your desires, move your lords onwards towards your opponents, defeat them in battle, and then siege their cities. And if you're successful there, then you're going to be able to get rewarded, take all of the gold, build new armies, build better buildings, take their cities from them, and then you can expand your empire. And just to show you how big this game is, these are the first 4 provinces. It'll probably take you about maybe an hour to get your hands on 4 provinces at the start of the game. And yeah, look how big this map is. So let's take a look at the 4 playable factions of the game. Firstly, Skaven. Skaven are oversized sewer rats who are tenacious and of eccentric intelligence. In battle, Skaven are a unique mix of numerous meat shield units designed to absorb punishment while overwhelming the enemy, and specialist units like the Hell Pit Abomination, which is literally too horrible to die and has a chance of regenerating whenever its hit points are low. Skaven have a special ability called the Menace Below, where they can spawn a unit anywhere on the battlefield. This is amazingly useful when neutralizing enemy artillery or preventing a flanking maneuver on yours. This army ability is a new feature of Total War Warhammer's second outing. On the campaign maps, Skaven hide their presence from their enemies while spreading disease and corruption that adversely affects their opposition. However, with a high metabolism, Skaven are in constant need of food. They gain food either through infrastructure or eating captured foes. If faction reserves are high, they will be more willing in battle and their cities will flourish. However, should larders become barren, rebellion is imminent. One interesting mechanic is that Skaven can use excess food to jumpstart the population of new cities, enabling an economically well-oiled machine to quickly form advanced colonies where their enemies least expected it. Next up, the High Elves. The High Elves are the custodians of the Vortex, seeking to protect it from outside influence. In battle, they are versatile and have a great number of defensive units. Unlike the Skaven, they also have access to a large variety of aerial units, including multiple dragons that can completely bypass melee combat and really turn the tide in your favor. On the campaign map, High Elves have a special currency called Influence, which they can spend on recruiting superior lords with admirable traits, or alternatively, to meddle in the diplomatic relations of other factions, perhaps turning them against each other, or alternatively, gaining new allies. The third initially playable faction will be the Lizardmen, who are the oldest of the races who have had a war against chaos that spans millennia. The Lizardmen have multiple breeds of Saurus within their faction, ranging from the gelatinous yet extremely magical Slann, the powerful Croxigors, all the way down to the smallest of the bunch, the skinks. But as if this wasn't enough variety, the Lizardmen are also adept at harnessing great beasts of their surrounding jungles, training and goading stegodons, carnosaurs, and bastillodons into battle. So if you've ever wanted to have your own Jurassic Park, now might be the opportunity. Outside of battle, the Lizardmen use the geomantic web, enhancing commandments in their provinces by tapping into a network of ancient power lines, and they're also capable of special spawnings, where upon completion of periodic missions, you will gain access to more powerful, blessed variants of Lizardmen units. Finally, let's talk about the Dark Elves, the sadistic alternative to their purer brethren who love nothing more than cruelty, murder, and slavery. Inside battle, Dark Elves are equally empowered by the falling of their foes and their allies, entering an enhanced state called Murderous Prowess when a threshold is reached. Dark Elves are highly capable offensively and have high amounts of armor piercing and anti-infantry units, while also still having access to mighty dragons and hydras that have regenerative capabilities. On the campaign map, Dark Elves can enslave their defeated foes and sacrifice them to gain powerful right bonuses. But their lords are fickle, have loyalty issues, and if they're neglected, can rebel against your cause. Late game Dark Elves can build black arcs, massive city ships, capable of manufacture as well as the reinforcing of units, effectively enabling them to take the crusade anywhere on the map. In addition to the 4 playable factions in Total War Warhammer 2, others from the first game will also appear on the map, either as adversaries or potential allies. These include the Empire, Vampire Counts, Chaos Warriors, Dwarves, Wood Elves, or the Greenskins. So now I want to talk about the features that are brand new for the game that weren't in the first outing for Total War Warhammer. One thing that I've enjoyed has been the exploration. Whenever you go to a city that has not been occupied yet, there's an option to scout it out. You'll be required to make a decision, and in true role-playing fashion, like those books that you had to flick backwards and forwards, you'll either get a good result or a bad one. And I'm sure all you role players out there will enjoy this feature very much. Next up, let's talk about traits. Your generals get better at doing the things that they spend the time doing. For example, are they sitting there recruiting all day long? Well, they're going to be able to recruit more cheaply and faster. Do they spend their entire time on the defense, protecting your important cities? Well, they're going to get better at building and reduce the cost of that for you. Next, I want to talk about rights, and the eagle-eyed of you might have seen this already in the video. Rights are grand scale spells that will affect your entire civilization and can last for multiple turns. Now, your choice of when to use a right can be crucial. If it's wasted, you might not have it for later when you really need it. Furthermore, the rights can be quite expensive and do reward the player that invests in his infrastructure and economy. One thing that really annoyed me about the first game is that factions were forced to colonize in certain areas, and you were simply prevented from occupying certain cities. That is not the case in Total War Warhammer 2. You can occupy whatever you want. However, there is also a soft counter for this, and that is called climate. If the climate is not suitable for you, then your growth is going to be much slower, the buildings will be more expensive, and your income is going to be less. And so while this encourages you to expand into certain areas for your faction, it doesn't prevent you from going off-piste, so to say. Finally, I want to mention one of my favorite things about Total War Warhammer 2, and that is the race to control the vortex. And the fact that whenever you start a ritual, gigantic armies appear to try and stop you. What this means is that for my campaign playthrough, there were pace-changing events. This resulted in this roller coaster ride of periods of great difficulty and then periods of recovery to be able to push the tempo to complete the ritual and inevitably win the game. So to conclude, I've been loving the Total War games since the original Shogun, which I played at the turn of the millennium when I was a spotty-faced teenager. And the original Shogun and medieval Total War 2 will always hold a place in my heart that I don't even think is replaceable. But I feel that Total War Warhammer 2 has come pretty close, and that's because this is the most up-to-date Total War game, but it also incorporates a wealth of variety from the Warhammer intellectual property. If we look at the original Total War game Shogun, the differences between the different regions of Japan were not really that great. You might have slightly better archers, or slightly better spearmen, or maybe your cavalry were a little better. While in Total War Warhammer, the factions are all so incredibly different, it adds a lot of extra strategy to the game, and I can imagine that multiple campaign playthroughs could be a more rewarding experience. I've already completed my Skaven campaign. It took me 50 hours. And I've got the feeling that if I was to start a campaign for one of the other 3 factions right now, I could easily sink another 50 into it. And this soothes what was one of my biggest concerns about the game, the fact that it's only a year and a half since the last Total War Warhammer game. I thought maybe Creative Assembly would have rushed the title, possibly skipped on the content, or just not added any new features whatsoever. Well, none of those 3 things are the case. This has just as much content as the original, and I feel provides a more entertaining campaign experience. And the thing that I'm most looking forward to is that Creative Assembly have announced that if you own both of the Warhammer Total War titles, that you will have access to what they're calling a grand campaign map, which is looking to be twice as big and combine the playable factions from both games. And so that about covers it. Total War Warhammer 2 is out this week on the 29th of September, and if you want to pick up a copy yourself, I'll put a link in the description and also in a pinned comment. And I really hope you enjoyed this video and it showed you just what the game is. If it did, please give it a thumbs up. I'd really appreciate it. And stay tuned to the channel because I have a subsequent series of army guides for all of the factions coming shortly. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.